Billy, it's a big one. It's the big one. It's the most powerful desktop GPU ever made. It's in fact the 3090. I have to start off with a big thank you to MSI for everything they did to set this up. I did manage to get it after Customs finally cleared the package. Thank you, Customs, for robbing me on 4 days and making me do this in 2. Just South Africa things. But I have spent 28 hours now with the graphics card over the last 2 days in this configuration to my left, and it wouldn't have been possible without MSI. They provided one of their brand new coolers, which is really cool of them. So I got a 360 more rad on the 10900K, which I have teamed up with their top 25,000 rand MSI MEG. Yeah, this is the Enthusiast Gaming Series motherboard, which I've actually have reviewed prior, and yeah, it's got enough power phasing for two 10900Ks, which is absolutely fantastic. A 50-watt power supply, because that actually was in the recommended spec from NVIDIA for testing the 3090, which is pretty cool. And no 8K monitor, unfortunately. We're still pleb level with a 1080p 144. LG, if you're watching this, I really wouldn't mind an upgrade. I don't need an 8K though. I think a 4K would be nice to have, but whatever. I still had a really good time with this, to be honest, because I've put in the 2 TB NVMe. I've, like I said, had 2 8GB DIMMs. I wanted 32 for testing on this, but I honestly don't really see any performance difference. I tested with a 3900 XT and a 2070 with 64 gigs RAM, which is a machine I built for a friend of mine that does 3D for the mines and stuff, and there was absolutely no gaming performance difference. Having dual channel already sort of ticks that box. And then the 3090 itself, what you see here in front of you is actually a 3080, and the only difference between the two physically is the NV link, which is missing off of the 3080 but is present on the 3090. The cooler design and stuff from MSI is pretty good, I have to say. You've got 3 8-pins instead of that annoying 12-pin weird looking setup where it comes out of the side of the Founders Edition. I actually don't really like that. I think the cooling setup was pretty cleverly done, but other than that, it was a bit annoying. It didn't look very neat. It made my inner PC builder have like mild epileptic fits over seeing that, to be quite honest with you. But these cards didn't. They're very clean, very straightforward, mild RGBing over the face of the card actually, and then one strip on top. And if you turn it off, it would make quite a nice stealthy looking build setup. The cooler's performance and the build quality of these cards from MSI is absolutely fantastic. And to be honest, when I first took the 3090 out of the box and put it next to the 3080, I was a little bit concerned because I thought, isn't this a much bigger GPU with a lot more resources on it, etc, etc. And while it is quite a lot more GPU, the cooling performance was simply superb. I actually it didn't thermal throttle once, even when I did go for some overclock, which I was busy fiddling with this morning. I didn't really do any overclocking initially, and all of the performance results and stuff that you will see on the graphs are without overclocking. So this is straight out of the box sort of performance. I did, however, do my normal fiddle in NVIDIA control panel, where I set the general texture mode to high performance, turn off VSync to make sure that that doesn't interfere with any of the benchmark results. And then I did enable DSL factors for some 4K testing later, but as a standpoint, I had it disabled and most of the stuff was done, well, pretty much everything was done at 1080p. Now this, when you get the pack from NVIDIA, when you open it up, they talk about 8K HDR gaming and how their clever AI changes it from a 1440p image, then upscales that to 8K and keeps the sharpness and clarity with the DLSS doing all of the heavy loading. And I have to say, DLSS is pretty legit, which we'll get into later. It is actually working quite well. And I was watching a piece of content on the 3080 leading into this review from another reviewer trying to go for 8K performance and not really getting there, especially on maximum settings. It was bumping to VRAM headrooms, and in the one game he was trying to test, it was sitting at GTA 5 specifically, it was trying 14 gigs worth of VRAM to go 8K, which is obviously a lot. So you look at 24 and you're like, nah, what are you going to use 24 for? No, it will use it. 14 gigs worth, it will get there. So this being a 10 gig card is honestly angled quite readily at 1440p performance. And while Nvidia said that this is an 8K gaming graphics card, and it is, I mean, the one benchmark that I did have access to being superposition, it did get 55 frames, which is pretty good, but I don't think that's what actually I agree that it's intended for. This is a 4K 144Hz gaming card. If we look at the 1080p first though, we can see that the performance increase is marginal. It's between 50 say to 80% over a 2070 Super. Now mine is overclocked as well, 100 MHz on the core, 1100 on the memory. The GDDR6 memory can get some pretty decent performance out of it, but it wasn't so much better that I was like, yeah, I would pay, you know, more than double of what I had paid for a 2070 Super. I mean, those were about 14, 15K at the end of their lifetime. This is a 42,000 Rand graphics card. And I looked at that, I was like, oh, maybe this thing isn't so great. Let me try some 2K performance testing. And then the gap started to widen. And I was like, but hold on. If it's already like it's a 2K, what about 4K? Is the VRAM going to make the impact that I think it is going to make? And boy, it did make an impact. You're looking at double a 2070 Super with the 3090 all in one slot, and now it has NVLink. So when I saw Project Cast 2 12K resolution support, I was like, come on guys, are you even going to be able to get there? Is there anything that's even going to be able to run that? And lo and behold, like 6 months after the fact, here drops the 3090. If you were to put two of these in NVLink and had 4K per monitor in a span display, I could see it running it, to be honest. Now 8K is no mean feat. You're looking at 4 times what you're rendering on 4K. So to get there is a lot of pixels. It doesn't quite scale the way we think it scales. Like 1K to 2K is double. It's not. It's more like, you know, triple, you know, and it scales exponentially like that. So after I saw the 2K performance bump, I sort of skipped it. And I was like, this thing can actually do 4K 144. And then not only can it do that, if you look at like COD Modern Warfare, the RTX, with RTX on, with everything maxed out, we're saying at 120 frame rate average. This is esports ready 4K performance. Once you go to over 100 Hertz, everything becomes super silky smooth, to be honest. And yes, you do see some performance difference between 144 and 240, but it's not like the jump from 60 to 144. That's a really big, noticeable, impactful jump. The jump from 144 to 240, if it's not buffered by something like G-Sync, it's almost superfluous in a lot of ways. It does feel incredibly smooth, don't get me wrong. It feels really smooth. It's just not as noticeable as a 60 to 144. And I think most people that do pro gaming and stuff would agree with me when I say that. We've really also reached the limitations of 1080p. Like Dota 2 was actually worse on the 3090 compared to the 2070. I do also put that down to how the engine and stuff has been optimized, because these graphics cards aren't out yet, and I did have some issues. Like when I first tested Metro Last Light, it didn't run at all, and then the next thing I ran it and it was sitting between 250 and 330 frames, peaking up there, and I was like, I've never actually seen it before. I never thought as well I would actually need a 240 Hz to test Firestrike. 220 frames per second when the first benchmark was like, it was like watching, it's like watching a beautiful symphony happening before your eyes. But on 4K, and when we go to 4K and you're getting that sort of performance results, I did record some gameplay of Metro Exodus at 4K running, you know, well over 100 frames for the most part, and it looked absolutely incredible. The recording just doesn't do it justice. What you see, even on a 1080p monitor at 144 with that 4K super sampled up, it just was so sharp and so clear. Playing COD at 120 frames per second in multiplayer was absolutely phenomenal. And actually, when I set it to 4K with the 2070 Super, it gave me a warning that I was running out of VRAM. Whereas this, it was only like a quarter of the total VRAM. So can it do 8K gaming? Yes, of course, it can. It really does. You will get 50 to 60 frames, I think, quite comfortably on most titles, especially if there's DLSS in there. The DLSS is no joke. It actually works. It's a legitimate technology now. It's not just some sort of fad. And it's like when we changed from I don't even know what it was, but to rasterization type of rendering, it was like, this is how we do things now. And when they tried to, I think, start with ray tracing, and we saw, you know, 20,000, 25,000 rand GPUs only getting like 30, 40 frames, it was like, no, this isn't a real technology. But now on COD, this is like 200 FPS at 1080p, no sweat. Even my 2070 Super can give 130 frame rate. So it's an esports sort of ready technology that's ready to go, and it's not massively impacting your performance anymore. And if you want true 4K, high resolution, high refresh rate gaming, then a 3090 is probably going to be the one to go for. I cannot believe how well it handled 4K. It was like swatting a fly, and that's with RTX on as well. And yes, it does cost 42,000 Rand. Even the Ventus one that they send me information on, which will come out a bit later in October, is still also going to be a 40,000 Rand graphics card. But if you absolutely have to have the best and you put this in a custom loop, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. You don't even need to though. The most I saw temperature wise on this was like 60s, mid 60s, high 60s. If you leave it on the standard fan profile, you will get a little bit less noise, but even with these fans ramping up to 60-70%, you will not hear it in the case. I barely heard it sitting right next to it, and this thing pumps out the hot air. You cannot believe, I mean, I could probably put a tissue paper over here and it would hold it up and push it away, absolutely no problems. The cooling design and everything from MSI is superb. I think it's much more understated. I'm kind of a little bit upset that it's not in a titanium finish, because I really like that about the 2070 Super, although black is way more neutral and will fit into most builds a lot more comfortably. You can turn off the RGB that it does have, but it's quite subtle. It's not over the top and shouty, I'm a graphics card for gaming, look at my RGB. None of that, at least. Look, all in all, the last 2 days, I sort of just sat eventually and played the games, you know, to get that experience, because that's what I wanted my channel to be about, was the gamer's experience. I've been in and around LAN gaming and stuff in South Africa for more than half my life. It's going on 18, 19 years. I have the gray hairs to prove it, okay? I've been there, I've done that, I've got 3 of the t-shirts, and experience is ultimately the thing we're after. And I've never had a 4K gaming experience like this. Now this morning I did try to do some OC. Like I said, I was quite pressed for time and I wanted to focus on making sure I got all the performance data I could for you guys on the base product setup. But I did do some overclocking of the GPU this morning, and it was actually very, very similar to what I experienced in the 2070 Super. Quite a lot of RAM bump. I've got it up to 900 megahertz plus, which is pretty decent, but the cores are pretty much maxed out as they come out of box. This one was boosting as much as 1980 to just over 2000 megahertz, with the normal Founders Edition boosts being quoted at about 1775, 1750 megahertz is what they're more or less aiming for. This card outperforms that by some, and like I say, it has a much better power design with it. I much prefer the 3 8-pins. I think it's going to look really nice in your system. If you've set up some cable combs on it, it's going to look absolutely fantastic. And 10,000 CUDA cores inside this thing. I mean, the Titan RTX from the last generation had 4,600, so they've doubled that up, and the result of that on 4K is a proper true 4K. If you've got a 4K 144 Hz or 120 Hz monitor, this can actually drive it properly, not like 100 frames. Like, it will go over that, and you can max out the title and it'll still do it very, very, very well. And even the games that it does do it at like 100 frames, it's so silky smooth. The 1% lows and stuff is so good. I'm absolutely in awe of the product that NVIDIA has made. Now, not everybody is going to want to shoot for that sort of performance level. And if you're after 1440p, I think from Jay, I'm going to quote Jay's 2 cents because Uncle Jay's my homie. Big respect, Uncle Jay. But he did a really good piece on the 3080 and showing that it was basically the same as the 2080 Ti at 1080p, but now in 1440p. So you're getting that resolution bump up. And this is the bump to 4K performance. And it's not a good value for money product. It's just not. Like there's no substantiating this as a good value product, except in one instance, which I thought about a little bit later, bringing it back to Project Cars. If you're a racing car team, if you buy a set of OZ, like really high performance rims, you're probably paying like 10 to 15,000 US dollars for just those rims, where you could pop 2 of these bad boys with a 10900K or a 3950X, whatever your flavor is, if you want to render out video, depending on that use case or not. But let's say you take the top processors of the day, 2 of these graphics cards, you have literally a proper 4K high ultra. I mean, imagine 2 of these. Imagine 2 of them side by side running 4K RTX. It's gonna blow your mind. It's actually gonna blow your mind. I can't, guys. I can't. Like, it is such a cool tech demo type item. I think the pricing that Nvidia is asking for may be impacted in the long run. We'll have to wait and see what happens with the new Radeon Instinct cards and everything that they're trying to do on that side with RDNA 2 and the big NVMe and stuff. But Nvidia was ready. Nvidia was ready, and they're showing that with this 3090. It's insane. And if I got one for free, I would never say no. I would never in my wildest dreams skip over that. If someone gave me a 3080 for free, I would honestly try and sell it to get the 3090 and pay in what I would have, had to pay in for the 3080 as it were. If I could, I would, is basically the bullet point of the presentation. I've never experienced anything like this. Experience wise, I don't actually know what else to say, guys. It's just really good. Big thanks though to MSI for hooking me up with everything, before the release date, so I get to pretend like I'm one of the big boys out there in tech and release, content for you guys on the day. What I've got on hand to test with and stuff, compared to the 2070 Super, it's everything that I experienced there on 1080p, but now I could do it in 4K. Mind blowing. DLSS is legit. RTX is the thing now. It is how we are going to do things. Ray tracing will be the way going forward. It does look and feel just that much better than rasterized processing, or rasterized graphical processing at least. Anyway, guys, like I say, what else can I say? I'm bowled over. This has been one of the best things I've ever gotten to work on, and I can only just thank MSI for the opportunity. I will be doing some other content on it later in the week. I'm going to put the 3080 and the 3090 on my 3950X setup and get benchmark results from that to see how it differs with the Intel 10900K. I'll be keeping the board and the cooling. I'll do some reviews on these things in the coming weeks, but yeah, it's been a really fun 2 days. Stressful, I'm not gonna lie. There was a moment where I almost uploaded my results to UL benchmark on the 30 mile fast track. I missed it. It was a close one on that. Mild panic, only a small heart attack. The fines are significant. But we didn't. We got everything done, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. If you have, then please do hit us up with a like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side.
All clear.